Hello everyone, today we're going to check passive voice. This is a very interesting topic, so you're going to see in a moment. First of all, we need to remember this. The focus on any sentence is the subject. Okay? The most important thing in any sentence is always the subject, because that's what you're talking about. Okay? Remember this, please. So let's start. Part 1. Sentence structure. So look at this. We have this painter. This is Diego Velázquez. And this is a painting. This is Las Meninas. That's the name of the painting. So here we have a sentence and we can say he painted Las Meninas in the 17th century. So on this sentence, he painted Las Meninas in the 17th century. We can find some elements that are important. First of all, we have the subject. In this case, he. Painted is our verb, and then the object. In this case, the direct object is Las Meninas. So we can say he painted Las Meninas in the 17th century. Obviously, if I want, I can also use pronouns. Just remember that. If I want, I could say Diego Velázquez, or if I want, I could say he. And in a similar way, for Las Meninas, I could say Las Meninas, or I could say it, the painting. So in the two cases, the two sentences are the same. I could say Diego Velázquez painted Las Meninas in the 17th century, or I could say he painted it in the 17th century. Remember, we have two types of pronouns. You have subject pronouns and you have also object pronouns. But let's continue with this. So as you see in this case, he painted. In this case, Diego Velázquez is the actor and he is doing the action. He painted Las Meninas. And the action is received by the receiver. You see, the actor performs the action and the receiver receives the action. And in this case, we have that. The actor is the subject and the receiver of the action is the object. Okay, and as you can see here, the action goes with this orientation. He painted Las Meninas. The actor does the action. And obviously we have the complement, but at the moment it's not really important. So you see, in this case, the subject is the actor. The verb goes to the receiver. And that's what we call active voice. Okay, when the subject is the actor. But as I said before, the focus on any sentence is the subject. So in this case, we are focusing on the subject. Part 2 is the same idea, but with a new focus. Normally, these are the elements of any sentence. Okay, you have an actor, you have an action, sometimes you have a receiver, and you have the context where it happens. Okay, those are all the different elements of a sentence. And if I want, I can focus on the actor. And I can say, well, the actor does the action on the receiver. In this case, I could say, he painted Las Meninas. He is the actor. And that's the idea of the active voice. Because you are focusing on the actor, of the performer of the action. But what happens? Okay, and this is the subject. But what happens if I want to focus on the receiver of the action? So you see that's different. If I want to focus on the receiver of the action, that is going to be called passive voice. It's similar. In this case, the focus is on the actor, so that's the active voice. In this case, the subject is the actor, because that's where we want to put the focus. But if I want to use passive voice, I want to focus on the receiver. So in this case, I have to make the subject the receiver. You see? So you're going to make the subject the receiver of the action. So for example, in this case we have Las Meninas is going to be our subject. Okay, Las Meninas is going to be our subject, and the action is going to fall into that. So if I want to use passive voice, I could say Las Meninas was painted by Diego Velázquez in the 17th century. Was painted. You see, the action goes to the subject. So remember, passive voice means that the subject is the receiver of the action. Now, obviously, if you want, you can mention the performer. You can say, Las Meninas was painted by Diego Velázquez in the 17th century, but it is also possible just to say, Las Meninas was painted in the 17th century. You don't have to mention the performer necessarily. Okay, it's not necessary. This part is optional. And in this case, remember, if the person is irrelevant or unknown, don't mention it. So if I say by someone, that would be incorrect, because in this case, if I say someone, that means that it's irrelevant or that I don't know about this person. So it's preferable to omit that expression. Don't say Las Meninas was painted by someone. No, it's obviously that it was obviously painted by someone. So if you want to mention the performer, mention it. If not, then don't put by someone. And that's the idea of passive voice. You see, the subject is going to be the receiver of the action. Is the person or the thing that receives the action. So never mention by someone or by people. Okay, because those things are usually irrelevant or unknown. Now let's see. Passive voice sentences can be affirmative, negative, or questions, just like any other tense. Let's start checking them. Las Meninas was painted by Diego Velázquez in the 17th century. You see, was painted. I can also make it negative if I want. I could say, Las Meninas wasn't painted by Salvador Dalí. In this case, the negative section is going to be usually with the verb to be. If I want, I can also make the yes, no questions. I could say, was Las Meninas painted with oil on canvas? And obviously the answer is yes, it was. So you see, we're going to use the verb to be for a lot of these cases. How was Las Meninas painted? Oh, it was painted, Las Meninas was painted with oil on canvas. You see, that's the way you can describe different ways to say the sentences. Just like any question, remember, please, you have to move part of the verb to the beginning of the sentence. Okay, that's a basic thing for questions. Okay, you just move the verb to be to the beginning. Now, remember that the passive voice can happen in different tenses. Okay, and the verb essentially is this. Is the verb to be and the past participle. For any sentence in passive voice, you have to use that. The verb to be and the past participle. Now remember please that the verb to be is going to be adapted to the different sentences. So you have to conjugate the verb to be. So for example, if my sentence is in present, in simple present, I have to say the internet is used by 60% of the population in the world. The verb to be is in present, is. Or I can also use it in present continuous form. I could say, vaccines are being tested in some countries. So you see, are being tested. I could also use it in simple past. Las Meninas was painted by Diego Velázquez. Was painted. The verb to be in simple past, and then the past participle of the verb. Or past continuous. When we arrived, the car was being repaired. Was being repaired. You see, this is the continuous, the past continuous, and then the past participle of the verb. The same thing can happen in more complex tenses. For example, you can use passive voice with modal verbs, with future with will, with the present perfect, with future with be going to, or even with perfect modals. For example, clean energy sources will be implemented in the city. clean energy sources should be implemented in the city. You see, should be, should with the verb be, and then the past participle. New laptops will be brought to replace the old ones. Will be, and then the past participle, brought. I'm sorry, the flight has been cancelled due to bad weather. Has been, and then the past participle. A new satellite is going to be launched this year. Is going to be, and then the past participle, launched. The moai must have been transported using ropes. Must have been, and then the past participle, transported. In all of these cases, we are using the verb to be and the past participle. Now, as you probably can see, usually in all of these cases, what you can see is that the verb to be is going to be essentially the tense. So check the verb to be if you want to know that if that sentence is affirmative, if that sentence is in present or in past continuous, etc. The tense is going to be dictated by the form of the verb to be. Okay, in this case, is used, that's simple present. Are being tested, that's present continuous. Was, that's simple past, etc. Okay, it's just a matter of practice for this part. Don't worry too much. It's easy actually. And as you see, you always have the two elements, the verb to be and the past participle. Okay, in all of these sentences, we have the verb to be and the past participle. Always. Remember that, please, okay? All these cases in passive voice are going to use the verb to be and the past participle. Part 3. When to use passive voice. It is very important to use passive voice in a very smart way. Especially because a lot of people, especially in formal situations, they would recommend not to use passive voice. But you're going to see why. So usually, don't use passive voice if the receiver is irrelevant. Okay, if the receiver is irrelevant, okay, I could say in the sentence in active voice, Angie eats pizza every month. That's okay. And I can use passive voice. I could say, a pizza is eaten by Angie every month. So technically the two sentences are okay. The grammar is perfect in both cases. But a pizza is not very relevant well, usually it is not very relevant. It depends on the contexts, obviously. But in this case, a pizza is not really relevant. So it is a little strange to emphasize it. So in this case, it would be preferable to use active voice. Angie eats pizza every month, instead of saying the passive voice. Okay, so don't use the passive voice if the receiver is irrelevant. And the second situation, this is especially when you're writing a document in intermediate or advanced levels. Okay, so if you don't know the actor, investigate more. Sometimes sometimes you can use passive voice to avoid saying who did the action. But in this case, it makes you sound a little bit unprofessional, or it makes you sound a little bit less confident on your answers. Because if the point of your text is to investigate, well, then you have to investigate. So usually you have to know who did the thing. So it is okay to say, it has been confirmed that ice sheets are melting. That's okay. But your professors or your teachers are going to tell you, okay, great, by whom? You can tell me that, but you have to give me evidence. If you tell me it has been confirmed, that means that you didn't investigate enough. So for that reason, you should try to investigate who did the action and then add them in active voice. NASA has confirmed that ice sheets are melting. You see, clearly here we can see the evidence of that. And if you want to investigate more about the topic, you can check this website. But that's essentially the point of this. So remember, if you don't know the actor, try to investigate more, especially if it's a research paper or maybe an investigation that you are going to present as a final project. Okay, so in those cases, try to investigate more and you will probably find the author or the performer of the action, and you can include them. Now, in this case, you could say, but both of the sentences are perfectly fine and both of them can work. What is the problem with the second sentence? Well, you see, in English, usually we have to mention who is doing the action. It's a language that has this structure. You always mention who is doing an action. For example, if I say, I broke my arm, in that case, I am mentioning that I am the performer of the action. Okay, even though if you think about it for a moment, it sounds like you did that on purpose. So I broke my arm on purpose. But that's not what I mean. What I mean is that I broke my arm because that happened to me. And in this case, it's similar. Angie eats pizza every month. It's preferable to say that as to say it in passive voice, because in passive voice it's more impersonal, and you are separating the performer of the action from the receiver of the action. So that's why usually you will see a lot of people recommending you not to use passive voice. Okay, they tell you passive voice should be avoided like the plague. It's not bad to use it, but just remember, it usually means that you don't know the performer. And if you're investigating a document, it is better to know your sources. So that's why usually you have to use active voice instead of passive voice. But passive voice is perfectly fine, so don't worry. Summary. So here we can see the difference between active voice and passive voice. Active voice means that the subject is the actor. So you know the performer of the action, and you're emphasizing that. You're emphasizing the performer of the action. Diego Velázquez painted Las Meninas. The actor, the action, and the receiver of the action. In the case of passive voice, it's a little different. Remember, the subject is the receiver. Okay, Las Meninas was painted by Diego Velázquez. So in this case, the subject is the receiver of the action. The verb in passive voice has this characteristic. You have to use the verb to be, and you have to use the past participle of the verb. The verb to be, obviously, it has to be conjugated according to the tense. Diego Velázquez painted Las Meninas. That is in past. So Las Meninas was painted by Diego Velázquez. The verb to be in past. And also don't forget, mention the author of or the performer of the action only if it is important or necessary. Okay, if it's by someone, don't say that. Or by people, no, that's also incorrect. Okay, only if it is important or necessary. And the uses. Try to use active voice most of the time, but you can also use passive voice, especially if the receiver is more important and we don't care for the performer of the action. Okay? That's the difference between active and passive voice, the emphasis. Still, it's more preferable to use active voice, but passive voice is perfectly fine when you're talking about objects. Okay? Especially art or paintings or discoveries, etc. Okay, a lot of the times the receiver of the action is more important than the performer. Or maybe you are talking about this. In my composition about the Mona Lisa, I am going to mention the Mona Lisa a lot. So it is important to mention the Mona Lisa. In my composition of Diego Velázquez, I will probably use more of the times Diego Velázquez, not too many times Las Meninas. But still, both can happen. Active voice and passive voice. And the differences are mostly stylistic. And, well, that's basically it. Please remember to study. Okay, don't forget to study. Don't forget to wash your hands. Also, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to this channel. And that's it for now. Okay, bye-bye, everyone.